Welcome to episode 43 in our series on Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto's The Path of the Just. And we finally reached the top rung of this metaphysical ladder, and we're going to deal with the virtue of holiness. This is the culmination of our progress until this point. And here the Ramchal is going to describe how holiness is a twofold process. So the Ramchal begins. Holiness is a twofold process. It begins with worship and ends with reward. It begins with effort and ends with a gift. The meaning of this is that one begins by sanctifying himself and ends up by being sanctified. And this was expressed by our sages of blessed memory, and he quotes from Yomar 39a. A person who sanctifies himself a little is then sanctified profusely. When he sanctifies himself from below, he is sanctified from above. So I think this was Ramchal means that we have to take the first step in everything. But if our first step is towards something holy or something good, God puts his wind in our sails. But he needs us to take that first step. The Ramchal continues now with the idea of cleaving to God, and that will lead to holiness. So the Ramchal continues. The effort required of a person is that he must separate himself and cut himself off completely from corporeality, cleaving incessantly, every moment and every hour, to the divine. In reference to this, the prophets were called angels, as it says in relation to Aharon, and he quotes from Malachi 2 verse 7. For the lips of the Kohen will guard knowledge, and they will seek Torah from his mouth, for he is an angel of the Eternal, master of legions. And it states in Divrei Hayamim 36:16, and they made a mockery of the angels of God. Even when he must deal with material matters that are essential to maintain his bodily existence, his soul should nonetheless not deviate from its sublime cleaving, which recalls the following statement from Psalm 63:9. My soul cleaves after you, your right hand has supported me. However, since it is impossible for a person to achieve this state on his own, for it is beyond his capacity, since he is, after all, corporeal and made of flesh and blood, I have therefore stated that the final stage of holiness is awarded as a gift, for man is capable of the initial effort, the pursuit of true knowledge, and the diligent reflection of transcendent matters, with regard to the sanctification of deeds. But at the terminus, the Holy One, blessed be He, will guide him along this very path that he so desires to walk, and will rest his holiness upon him and sanctify him. Then his effort will bear success, allowing him to remain continuously in the state of cleaving to the Blessed One. Thus, what nature withholds from him will be provided by the Blessed One's help and assistance, as in the following statement. And he quotes from Psalms 84 verse 12. He withholds no goodness from those who walk in innocence. Therefore, as previously mentioned, they have said, a person who sanctifies himself a little, which refers to what a person is capable of acquiring through his own effort, is sanctified profusely, which refers to the aid that the Creator, blessed be his name, gives him, as I have written. Regarding a person who is sanctified through the holiness of his Creator, even his physical deeds truly become matters of holiness. This is illustrated by the eating of sacrificial offerings, which is a positive commandment itself, and they of blessed memory have said in Pesachim 59b, the Kohanim partake of the sacrifice, and in this manner the owners receive atonement. Here I want to call attention to the distinction between one who has attained purity and one who has attained holiness. For one who has attained purity, his corporeal deeds serve only his essential needs, and he himself utilizes them only out of necessity. In this manner, they gain release from the ingredient of evil that exists within all corporeality, and they remain pure. However, they have not yet entered the domain of the holy, For if one could manage without them, he would then be better off. One who has attained holiness, however, and who cleaves to his God constantly, and whose soul walks about immersed in thought regarding those matters that are of a transcendent nature, in his love for his Creator and in his fear of him, is considered as if he were walking about before the eternal in the, and I quote, land of the living, in other words, the world to come, while still in this world. And this kind of person is likened to the tabernacle, the Beis HaMikdash, and the altar. And this is related to what our sages of blessed memory commented in Bereshis Rabbah 82:6. God's presence left him. Bereshis also 35:13 means that the patriarchs themselves are the divine chariot. So, with the lack of Beis HaMikdash in today's world, the opportunity is still there. The opportunity is there to rectify and refine one's character, purify one's soul, make it a welcoming makom, or place for God to dwell within. Let his Shekhinah rest within a human being. This is possible. And this is what the Ramchal is telling us. It's telling us that we have become physical Beis HaMikdash. And what we eat then becomes like a sacrifice to God in this metaphysical, physical Beis HaMikdash within our own bodies. And the Ramchal now describes how the divine presence dwells within the righteous, and their food is equal to the sacrifices offered in the Beis HaMikdash. So he continues, in similar fashion they have said, the righteous themselves are the divine chariots, for the divine presence dwells with them as it dwelt within the Beis HaMikdash. Consequently, the food that they eat is likened to a sacrificial offering that is placed on the fires of the altar, and whatever offerings were brought to the altar must have unquestionably undergone a tremendous spiritual elevation, since they were being sacrificed before the divine presence. The enhancement that they received as a result of this was so great that their entire species throughout the world was blessed accordingly. As our sages of blessed memory explained in the Midrash, in a similar vein, the food and drink that is eaten by a holy person undergoes a spiritual elevation, as though it had actually undergone sacrifice on the altar. This is similar to what they of blessed memory said in Kesuvat 105b. Whoever brings a gift to a Torah scholar is regarded as if they brought bikurim, or the first fruits offering. And they said in Yomos 71a, fill the throats of Torah scholars with wine, in place of the wine libations. This does not mean that the Torah scholars should be chasing after food and drink, heaven forbid, filling their throats in the manner of a glutton stuffing himself. Rather, it must be understood within the context of what I have already mentioned, that Torah scholars who possess holiness in their ways and in all their deeds are truly likened to the Beis HaMikdash and the altar, for the divine presence dwells with them just as it dwelled within the Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, whatever is brought to them is like a sacrifice upon the altar, and the filling of their throats is in place of the filling of the basins into which the libations were poured. And now, the Ramchal is going to bring an example from Bereshis Vayetze, in the part where the stones that Yaakov placed around his head all moved together to be under his head. So the Ramchal continues, in this manner, any object in the world that they, the Torah scholars, make use of, after they have already attached themselves to the Blessed One's holiness, is elevated spiritually and enhanced, since it has served the needs of the righteous. Our sages of blessed memory were referring to this in connection with the stones of the place that Yaakov took and placed around his head. And he quotes from Chulin 91b. Rabbi Yitzchak said that this teaches us that they are all gathered together, each one saying, let the righteous lay his head upon me. In summation, Holiness consists of one cleaving to his God to such an extent that in his performance of any deed he will neither detach himself nor stir from the Blessed One, and as a result of this, the physical objects that he makes use of will become elevated by his use of them to a greater degree than his decline from his state of cleaving and from his loftiness in the course of using things of a physical nature. But this depends on his constantly focusing his mind and intellect on the greatness, exaltedness and holiness of the Blessed One until he finds himself truly in unison with the celestial angels, as it were, whilst still in this world. Now the Ramchal is going to describe how the acquisition of holiness is predicated on one's acquisition of all the previous virtues or rungs of this metaphysical ladder. So the Ramchal continues, I have already mentioned that one cannot do this on his own, other than to strive in this direction and to make the necessary efforts. And this can be done only after he has internalized all of the noble virtues previously mentioned, from the beginning of vigilance through fear of sin. With this he may enter the inner sanctuary. This analogy is based on Vayikra 16:3 and succeed. For if he lacks these former virtues, he is like an outsider and one who has a deformity, about whom it was said in Bamidbar 18:4, an outsider may not draw near. But after one has prepared himself accordingly, and he continues cleaving, through powerful love and intense fear, through reflection upon the greatness of the Blessed One and the might of his exaltedness, he will gradually detach himself from corporeal concerns, and in all his actions he will direct his heart to the esoteric dimensions that are found in true communion with God. And in continuation of this, a spirit from above will be bestowed upon him, and the Creator, blessed be He, will rest His name upon him as He does upon all of His holy ones. Then he will become truly like an angel, and all his actions, even the lowly and physical ones, will be like the sacrifices and the priestly service. And thus you see that the way to acquire this virtue is through continued abstinence and profound analysis of the mysteries of divine providence and the esoteric dimensions of the world, and through the understanding of the Blessed One's exaltedness and praiseworthiness, until one cleaves to him intensely. He must therefore be able to direct his thoughts while he is engaged in mundane matters, just as the priest should do when slaughtering the sacrifice or receiving its blood or sprinkling it, until the Blessed One's blessing of life and peace is drawn towards him. Anything other than this would make it impossible for him to attain this lofty level, and he will inescapably remain corporeal, the same as other people. So the Ramchal is telling us, when this pious individual has reached this high stage, his focus must be laser sharp in regards to his mission or his kind of thought process in everyday matters. Everything has to be driven by a desire to do everything towards for God's sake. And now the Ramchal is going to describe the conditions surrounding him, how he has to keep himself separate from perhaps even his friends and colleagues, and find solitude, because this great endeavour has to be taken without distractions. And so the Ramchal continues. What is of assistance in acquiring this virtue is solitude, and a large measure of seclusion, for without disturbances one's soul can gain in strength and cleave to its Creator. The factors that lead to the loss of this virtue are the lack of true knowledge and the continued social intercourse, for corporeality finds like company and revives and revitalizes itself, whilst the soul remains in captivity within, unable to escape its prison. However, when he detaches himself from people and remains alone and prepares himself for his holy inspiration, he is led upon the path that he desires to travel. And with the divine assistance that is given to him, his soul will be strengthened from within. It will rule over the physical, will cleave to the blessings of God's holiness, and will be perfected in this manner. From this point, he will be elevated to an even higher plane, that of Ruach HaKodesh, or divine inspiration, where his understanding will transcend the limits of human capabilities, and his state of cleaving will permit him to reach such a lofty plane that he will be able to receive the key for the resurrection of the dead, as it was given to Eliyahu and Elisha. This demonstrates the great intensity of his cleaving to the Blessed One. For the eternal, blessed be his name, is the source of all life, giving life to all living creatures, as our sages of blessed memory have commented in Ta'anis 2a. 3 keys were not placed in the hands of a messenger, the key for the resurrection of the dead, etc. Therefore, one who cleaves to the Blessed One completely will be able to tap from him even the very flow of life, which, more than anything else, is particularly attributed to God, as I have just written. And that's the way the Brisa of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair ends. And he quotes that from Avodah Zorah 20b. And he quotes, "And holiness leads to divine inspiration, and divine inspiration leads to the resurrection of the dead." And now the Ramchal is going to tell us how this work, his book, should serve as an introductory guide to the acquisition of true piety, or Hasidus. And he continues, "And you, dear reader, I realize that you would recognize, as I do, that in this work I have not come to the end of all of the precepts pertaining to piety, and that I have not said all that can be said, for there is no end to the matter and no limit to one's reflections. But I have said something about each particular component of the brisa upon which this work has been based. This may serve as a beginning and a gateway to a broader study of these matters, since their structure has been revealed and their paths have been exposed before our eyes, allowing us to walk securely along them. In reference to things of this nature, it has been stated," and he quotes from Proverbs 1 verse 5, "The learned person will listen and increase his knowledge, and the contemplative one will acquire profundities." And also he quotes from Shabbos 104a, "And one who seeks to be purified is assisted." And also from Mishlei 2 verse 6, "For the Eternal will impart wisdom, from his mouth will come knowledge and understanding, to direct each person's path before his Creator." So the Ramchal is stating that once we have reached the upper echelons of this ladder, God will, although he's been with us every step of the way, he will give you that final push when we're trying to get over the wall or trying to reach that plateau. The last push, where we're perhaps exhausted from our efforts, will be given by God and raise us to another level that we never thought possible, and even our understanding will change. Concepts that we were never aware of become implanted in our minds as clear as day, and the guidance from God is more profound and more real than can be imagined. And now the Ramchal is going to describe how the nature of piety is the same for everyone, yet it can be acquired in all walks of life. And that's very, very true. Every level of holiness can be achieved by every single human being on this planet. Even the Rambam describes it's not only Jewish people, people who are not Jewish can attain the rank of prophets, as the Rambam has described in, I think it's Yesodei HaTorah. we should understand that it's not for some elite level of people. It just requires effort, tremendous effort, and taking your progression step by step with absolute commitment. And you will realize when you're on the way, and you genuinely are on the way, God knows that you are genuinely heading in the right direction and will help you along your way, will twist reality to help you in the right direction. So let's continue. The Ramchal continues. We can easily understand that every person needs direction and guidance in accordance with his skills and his occupation, since the path of piety, appropriate for one whose Torah is his vocation, is unsuitable for one who must place himself at the employ of another, and neither of these ways is suitable for one who is engaged in his own business. And this is the case regarding all the other particulars of human affairs in the world. There was a path to piety that is suitable to each and every individual, whatever his vocation. This is not to say that the nature of piety varies, for it is the same for everyone, since its goal is to bring pleasure to the Creator. But in view of the fact that circumstances are always changing, the means leading towards the implementation of the goal must also vary according to the circumstances that prevail. It is possible that someone who out of necessity is a simple artisan may become a completely pious person, like an individual who never stops learning. As it states, and he quotes from Proverbs 16:4, the Eternal created everything for his own sake. And it says also from Proverbs 3:6, in all your ways know him, and he will direct your paths. And the Ramchal is now going to conclude this magnificent work with a prayer for help from God, for growth in all areas and following his ways. So the Ramchal continues and concludes, may the Blessed One in his mercy open our eyes through his Torah and guide us in his ways and lead us in his paths, and may we be worthy of glorifying his name and pleasing him. And he quotes from Psalms 104:31, may the glory of the Eternal endure forever, let the Eternal rejoice in his works. And also from Psalms 149 verse 2, let Israel rejoice in its Maker, let the sons of Zion exult in their King. Amen, amen, amen. And that concludes chapter 26 and concludes this book, The Path of the Just, the magnus opus of the Ramchal. And I hope this is as inspiring for you as it has been for me. And I hope that anybody listening to this series will gain strength and education from the words of the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, in his guidebook to being a perfect servant of God and guiding us upon this metaphysical ladder that will take us all the way up to God.